Hi, this is Catherine, and welcome back to Taking Tea with Catherine, and another installment of my ongoing series, Bookish Hypochondriac, in which I love to talk about book-related incidents when I wasn't feeling so great, and sometimes made-up issues. We'll see. But this was a real one. Now, first of all, when I feel a headache coming on, whether it's a migraine or not, before I even reach for the Tylenol, which I might, I try to use some kind of tea to combat the symptoms. Or if I've already taken medicine, I will take it as a little side friend. I'm not an expert on healing herbs or any of these things, but most people say that caffeine helps. And obviously I am not someone who can drink a lot of caffeine, which is why I really can't take Excedrin, besides the fact that aspirin and I don't usually work out well together. But even the Excedrin amount of caffeine is enough to make me fly. You will believe a Catherine can fly. So I will try to keep it slightly natural and slightly over the counter. Anyway, so one of the things besides caffeinated things like tea, so I'd probably reach for black tea in that case because it is one of the higher caffeine contents without being nuts. I think I'm not an expert. But would be rose petals. They're supposed to be good. So one tea I would recommend is rose black from Empire Coffee and Tea, or any rose black tea, because you got a little of both and it just tastes really good. So even if it doesn't help the headache, it tastes good. And of course, mint. In my case anyway, I find peppermint helps a lot of the issues that I have. I'm not drinking as much peppermint tea right now because I'm also taking a peppermint capsule oil concoction. It's supposed to be good for some of my digestive issues, which I don't like to talk about, but it's given me a bit of a reflux. So I can't have too much more peppermint in my life, but that is a good one anyway for headaches if you don't have my problems. So why am I talking about headaches? Well, we're going to talk about that in a minute. Now, another thing I'm going to talk about, let's tie it all together, is the fact that I used to read a lot more comic books than I do now, or at least a few different comic book series. Never been the biggest follower or reader of comic books. If I'm honest, I can't, there's just too many to get into. For me. For other people, I get it. It's your thing and I'm not against it. I also think that some people put down reading comic books as opposed to, just books with words, because, it's not the same. But you know what? It does take a certain kind of concentration, which not everyone has. So I actually give people who follow comic books a lot of credit, honestly. But I did go through a phase where I was reading more a while back. And I used to watch a lot more of the comic book related television shows and films. At this point, I don't watch anything regularly. I don't even know if I'm going to watch Doctor Who when it comes back on, because I don't know if I'm going to have the right channels, and I'm just getting so tired of having to subscribe to new things. I've really been trying to read more than watch things, but I'm not going to ever swear off anything completely. But anyway, I was, there's always that Marvel versus DC thing, which I hate fighting about that kind of thing. I think they're both good. Although in the past couple of years, I haven't been as up to date in watching all these Marvel movies. I just got tired of it. I just literally got tired of it. And the same thing with the DC TV shows, which I used to watch almost all of them. I'm trying to remember the order it came on. There's a thing called Arrowverse. Most of it has appeared on the CW network, or at least in the United States. And that started with Arrow, with the Green Arrow. And then I think The Flash came along, which I liked a lot. I didn't really watch Arrow that much. I watched The Flash. I liked that very much. Supergirl came on. I watched that. And there's been a few other things that have been coming out of that. And I think at this point, I just can't follow anymore. I just can't watch anymore. And it's just too many stories. So I've watched a bit of almost all the television shows that have come on that are DC Comics related, but I just in the past year or two just stopped. I just can't follow it anymore. And if you like it, that's your thing. I'm not against them. I just can't. But I have been seeing commercials for and being interested in their own version of Crisis on Infinite Earths, which is their version of a comic book series that was made in the 80s, the mid 80s, 1985, I believe, and was written by Marv Wolfman and George Perez. Am I pronouncing it right? I can never pronounce names, period. But the version of the CW Arrowverse is probably going to be a little bit different. But there are some things already that I've seen just clips of that are similar. However, I don't remember a lot of the story. I read Crisis on Infinite Earths about 10 years ago. But I still think that I'm going to at least watch this CW version when it comes on, which I think is next week or something. Because I do like the idea of all the crossovers. It's kind of fun. And also because, even if it's just for a clip, I think they're going to bring Tom Welling for at least one scene. And he was the Clark Kent in Smallville, which I loved. That was the one that I really loved. I'm not even going to go back to the 90s when I used to watch other things, but, but that was a big one for me. So even just having a little reunion, a little throwback there could be fun to me. But I am curious how they're going to pull it off, because Crisis on Infinite Earths was, for someone like me who's not great at following comics as much as I'd like to be, it was nuts. I mean, it brought together characters from all over the DC universes and the multiverses, which apparently at that point they had already gotten into the multiverse theory, where there were worlds, Earths, for instance, on top of each other. So if you are from this Earth, there is someone else existing that is you, basically, on another Earth at the same time, existing, but in a slightly different way. And that was the whole deal. So you could be in another kind of like an alternate reality situation. It's somewhat they try to explain it with science, but I'm not great at science. But the deal with this series was to kind of bring together the Earths. And they used a guy called the Anti-Monitor. There was a guy called the Monitor who was supposedly a good guy, but the Anti-Monitor was this terrible guy who used antimatter and tried to put the Earths together and started destroying Earths and starting to get all these power. I don't know. I don't remember most of the story. But it turned out that a lot of the superheroes had to team up. Some of the big ones died. I'm not going to say who, but some of the big ones died. Just died. I don't know how they brought them back afterwards, because I'm not that much of a knowledgeable person about comic books, honestly. I'm going to tie in why I'm mentioning this at all very soon. But yeah, they also had, in order to defeat this Anti-Monitor character, they had to bring in some bad guys to help out too. Like a really bad guy in the DC universe. One of the ones that Superman had the hardest times fighting. So it was just so many different people, so many different Earths. I mean, infinite Earths. And I decided to read it one evening. I don't know if I finished it in one evening, but I at least read a chunk of it and finished it. Yeah, I probably started beforehand. I don't know. When I had a migraine. So, now about my migraines, I'm not going to say feel sorry for me, because I do not have chronic migraine. I know people who suffer from chronic migraine who actually work and rarely take off for these migraines. When I say chronic migraine, the definition, as I've read it, is that you get migraines. You suffer from migraines at least half of a month. That's never been the case for me. In my worst times of having migraines, I would have it maybe twice a month for a couple of days. Tops. I think the worst month was 3 times in a month. And even then, no more than 2 or 3 days. And I'm not saying that I didn't, I felt great because I only had it for a couple of days. But I mean, comparatively, that's half a month is really bad. I mean, that's very disabling. So, however, when I have a migraine, it's not always easy for me to do anything, really. One of the most difficult things for me is lighting. Sounds can be, I'm sensitive anyway in my normal life. Sounds can be bad if it depends on the sound, But I can, like, for instance, I can have the television on and the sound of it probably won't be bad as long as I keep it not too loud. And, but there's certain things lights that can really bother me. And one of the hardest things for me is reading on a phone, for instance. Like, this is kind of TMI, but years ago, when we had the early text messaging, I actually remember when I was having the worst of my migraines, trying to text someone and throwing up in the middle of it. I was so sick. I'm sorry. I hate talking about that. But so I've always had trouble watching things on television, especially things that are bright. If it's like a, easygoing sort of thing that you could have on the background, I could probably deal with it. I can have low lights and I'll be okay. And sometimes I could even read books. But if I'm reading a book, it has to be, low light but readable light. And it has to be something that doesn't take a lot of concentration. So, maybe like an easy novel, nothing that's, or even a nonfiction that's about a subject that I'm pretty much knowledgeable about. It's just a reminder. Something that I can read without having to really invest brain power. If I have a really bad migraine, though, I can't read at all. But I don't know why I decided to keep carrying on with this during my migraine, because I remember it being a specifically bad migraine. So one of the hardest things is that this type of book has this kind of stuff. So you're following dialogue in bright colors and explosions and so many different storylines because they're trying to converge things together. And people come out of nowhere, and then, like 20 pages later, you have to remember where these people came from. And this is already assuming you know anything about the DC universe whatsoever. I know the basic stuff. Like I've watched most of the Batman series of any kind or films. I've watched most of the Supermans. I've watched The Flash, Supergirl. You know what I mean? Like, but I hadn't watched The Flash or Supergirl at this point. You know what I mean? So, like, I'm one of your surface people. And there were so many characters that I just could not remember where they came from, what they did. I looked over this again and had slight memories of what had happened. But, oh my goodness. So, why am I talking about this? Well, basically because it's Bookish Hypochondriac, and I'm always talking about how being sick affects my reading, or how reading affects my being sick. And my advice would be, if you're into, first of all, again, if you're into comic books and you're really good at following them and explaining them, very much congratulations. Also, please be patient with people if they're not as invested in it as you are. If they're at all interested in it, be happy for them. Don't try to test them on their knowledge, because you know what? It's like if someone comes up to me and says, I like tea, and I know I'm not the biggest tea expert, but I know more than the average person. But like if someone says, I like tea, and I try to test them on the different kinds of teas, they're probably not going to want to talk to me anymore, much less even think about tea. So just be happy. But it's cool that you guys can keep track of all the universes, all that stuff. It is. But again, if you suffer from migraines, if you have headaches, maybe give that sort of thing a rest. If you have tickets for the next Avengers, which I don't know if it's going to be a next Avengers, but, and you feel a migraine coming on, make sure you can take care of it before you go ahead in, because that's not fun. But I hope that this crisis series that is coming out next week is fun and good and ties things together. They also have already operated on the multiverse theory, where people keep coming from different universes and coming together. Sometimes it's fun, but sometimes it's a bit much. The whole purpose of this series was to kind of start bringing people together and not having all these multiverses. So I'm kind of hoping they do that with those shows. So anyway, that's my little discussion. I probably won't talk very often about comic books and series. Again, I'm not against them. I have quite a few of them. They are opening a Midtown Comics outlet near my home, which is weird because all the years that I wanted one to be near me, and now they're coming. I may go to them, but only to sell certain things back. I did like certain series. I liked the Ms. Marvel that had come out a few years back, but I just got tired of following it, and I'm much more of a bookish, reading books with the occasional picture. I admire all that stuff. I can't do Comic Cons anymore. Going back into the hypochondriac thing, I've been to at least 2 Comic Cons and it's been ages, and both times I was sick in some way. So I think that even though I'm a nerd, I don't think that's the kind of nerd that I am. However, it's kind of, there are fun bits of it. So enough said. This has been Catherine from Taking Tea with Catherine. I hope you have a lovely, tea-filled, and healthy day. Bye-bye.